Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Today we have a conversation with a friend.
This is Ed Rosa, bon vivant, professional simpleton, and you can check out my and our work on youtube.com at Toothless Richard Productions. This is Gateway Cinema, Episode 9, Direction, and we're discussing Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
A director pulls together disparate personalities to work on extremely ambitious creative projects called movies. This effort may take years to conclude and is constantly under pressure to save money, time, and energy. Doing this kind of work well employs a wide skill set, including the ability to compartmentalize emotional energy, multitask, and do long-term planning. They define what must happen and leave it to others to figure out how. In graduate school, I had a professor who could speak faster than I can in complete sentence paragraphs for several hours on end. I found him fascinating. His name was John Wagner, and I took him first for a class on film theories, which was a subject I knew nothing about. And he was exposing us to a whole variety of different ways to conceptualize the interpretation of a movie. Again, as I say, I had never thought about a lot of this stuff. It blew my mind. He would always return to certain key movies as examples, and one of them was Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, which I had never heard of before I was in his class. So John Wagner says, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. And I'm like, run that back again? There's a movie where a person's demand is to bring me the head of another human? What? I think soon after I saw The Wild Bunch and got a taste for the balletic violence. It was on Laserdisc.
Nice.
Of the Peckinpah.
The best format.
Right. There's something rad about that. But I never did see Alfredo Garcia, partly because it is hard to find, and partly because there are so many other things that are seemingly more important by directors, including Sam Peckinpah, including Straw Dogs, the Osterman Weekend, you name your other titles, which bubbled up ahead of it. So the next feature, when I was a relatively new parent, I had that Netflix DVD account, and I could get a copy of Alfredo Garcia. So I sent away for one.
The glory days of Netflix.
It was wonderful. I have my final envelope tucked away for safekeeping. There was a night I had insomnia, and I had Alfredo Garcia on top of the TV. I put it into my DVD player. I began playing it. I got maybe 10 minutes in, and there was a crack in the disc. So I had to send it back. It was probably the one copy in North America. I couldn't get it again, and so it went by.
Yeah, there was very, very long wait.
Very, very long wait. And I got so tired of waiting, I stopped and moved on to the next thing in the queue. This is just to say I have been anticipating this movie for more than 30 years. So when you said, let's watch Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, and I know in our private conversations beyond our recordings, you have long suggested, you, Garrett, need to see this movie. I fully understand why now that I have accomplished this simple task. And I should tell you that for almost exactly 1 hour of the movie, I was impatient and didn't like what was happening. And thought, what was that John Wagner talking about? What was the value of this movie to history? Why does this matter to film theory? And then it takes a turn, which we'll, I'm sure, get to and talk about, at which point this becomes one of the most gnarly movies I have seen.
Yeah.
So the briefest way I can establish this movie's plot, a Mexican crime lord of some sort has a daughter who's impregnated out of wedlock. And he demands to know the man's name, hurting her in the process, in fact, breaking her arm. She confesses Alfredo Garcia impregnated me, and he sends his minions $1 million to bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia, who has defamed my family name, but I'm going to have a grandson soon. Isn't that great? 2 months later, some dudes walk into a bar. They meet Warren Oates, who plays Benny, a former Army personnel kind of a dude who's drifting through Mexico, getting terribly drunk and playing piano for tourists. He catches wind of what's going on. He has a girlfriend, Elita, this is Isela Vega, who was once the lover of Alfredo Garcia and seems to know where he was/is because Garcia is now dead. Benny wants to collect the head from the grave, turn it in for the bounty, which he's been told is only $10,000. He's been lied to. And he wants to use this money so he and Elita can start a new life together and live madly in love. Well, it all goes wrong. It all goes wrong.
Yeah.
The head is recovered. Elita is killed, Benny goes on the run and decides that he's going to instead just bring the head in, and he kills everybody in his path. In fact, most people kill one another trying to steal the head from him. The head, who he refers to as Al, fly-ridden and gnarly. In the end, he collects the $1 million once realizing the actual value of the thing. He frees the grandson of El Jefe, played by Emilio Fernandez, who's the one who set this whole thing in motion. Then the child escapes with Jefe's daughter, and Benny is shot down, much like the Wild Bunch, by the minions of El Jefe as he's trying to leave. The movie ends. Mm-hmm. To put this even more succinctly, a warlord asks for a man who impregnated his daughter, his head to be brought to him. It is. Movie's over.
Yeah, pretty much.
And to even say aloud all the things I have just said to describe the story of this movie and its main plot points, my goodness, why would anybody make this? Why would anybody then celebrate it? Why would anybody become a fan of this? Why would the cult that brought you and then me on your back into talking about this movie, why would it even exist? And it rests on Sam Peckinpah. We're thinking about him as one of the big directors that I think we mutually agree is a fantastic example of the movie artist. But let me ask you a couple of questions. Who's the protagonist?
It's got to be Benny, right? Because especially to a lot of people, he's basically a stand-in for Peckinpah. So this is the closest thing, I guess, Peckinpah made to like an autobiographical work. Warno's even modeled the character after Sam Peckinpah, like a bunch of his like mannerisms or like the glasses, like the whole thing. He was basically playing him. Until you explain to me why I'm wrong, which I expect is what's coming, I would say it's Benny.
Okay. But this movie is set in motion by one action, and that is El Jefe breaking his daughter's arm to earn the name Alfredo Garcia.
Right.
If Jefe does not make that choice, there is no movie. And the movie can only end when Jefe's will, bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia, is fulfilled. Mm. Unfortunately for Jefe, Benny kills him. Benny is then killed. So the movie can naturally conclude. Mm. The protagonist then, in my way of thinking of it, is the little screen-timed character of El Jefe.
Okay.
I don't know that that matters, except that we often think about stories that begin with an action taken by somebody to make things happen. And when everything starts to happen based on that decision, we have something to watch. Mm. And then when that initial decision is turned around and resolved, everything can close. Mm. And this movie rather abruptly concludes with a gigantic set of murders. Mm. It's a gigantic set of murders. It takes a while for the violence to really kick off, and we get little signals that it's coming. But then it just really, it's extraordinary bloodshed all at once, and movie's over. Mm-hmm.
Once we round the corner of, Elita's passing, what the MacGuffin or whatever of the head is no longer an issue, and now Benny's just focused on finding who wanted it and why they wanted it, and that becomes like his obsession. It isn't even about the money at that point anymore. So in that respect, the whole thing is leading back to El Jefe.
So here's proof two. If we think about the structure of movie making as it's often practiced in the United States, we do have this lingering idea of the auteur theory. Mm-hmm. That notion that there is one primary personality that moves everything along despite the collaborative arts that roll into every movie. Okay. The auteur of this has to be Peckinpah. Mm-hmm. Yes, he collaborated with a lot of folks, including Warno's, who, as you say, is him on screen. But El Jefe makes the thing go. El Jefe calls the shots. El Jefe has the wealth. El Jefe makes people bend to his will. El Jefe does not give a damn even about his daughter who's pregnant with his grandchild, bends her over, strips her down, humiliates her in front of his family and his employees, breasts out, the whole thing, right? And then breaks her spirit to get what he wants. That's the job of a director.
Yeah.
And so that sort of metaphor right there on screen in our opening sequence of the movie to set the thing in motion and give us our title statement, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, means to say El Jefe is Peckinpah, but so is Warno's as Benny. Both of those are embodied on screen, and I can't help but notice that, especially because the whole of Peckinpah's career as a movie director is driven by a really intense devotion to failed forms of butch masculinity, to the crutch of violence that men lean on to control one another, but especially women, and the value and importance of drink to make the whole thing get greased and move along.
Absolutely.
This movie's drenched with tequila.
Well, that's kind of a directorial trademark, the bottle of liquor. Nobody uses a glass. And it's so funny because alcohol what really was probably the thing that informed like his work and his life more than anything else as well, other than whatever trauma he suffered in his life that caused him to have such a sort of a bleak worldview. And not that anybody whose eyes are open can't see that there's no reason not to have a bleak worldview. So the auteur thing, right? I mean, certainly Sam Peckinpah is a name that like conjures those images, and he's a guy who has like sort of a stylistic through line. But it's my understanding that the later in his career we go, the more that the drugs and alcohol were such a problem, like he could not work.
I am older now than Warren Oates was when he made this movie. But Warren Oates barely outlived where I am right now.
Yeah.
Died of a heart attack, no doubt related to years of abuse to his body, including alcoholism. Sam Peckinpah, I think, lived to be in his late 50s. And then similarly, heart failure, system failure, all related to alcohol, drug abuse, and lots of hard living. We're not watching men who are aging gracefully or well or into a true old age. By today's standards, 2025, a person somewhere in their 40s is firmly just middle-aged. But these men have already had so many failures pile up in their lives. All of the male characters that we sort of center on in the Peckinpah universe, the protagonists, they're fallen characters who have nothing to look forward to but some kind of a way to get to the bottom of the biggest bottle they can possibly pay for, hopefully in the company of good friends, and maybe, if they're lucky, with a lover nearby. Benny seems to have organized that plan, and the way the movie unfolds, let me carve out a couple of things, and this is driven by a question that I additionally want to offer you, and maybe we can work on this a little bit together, and that is, what's the point of this movie? We often connect auteurism to deep themes that undergird the technique and the craft, because you can look at a particular shot and say, that's a Spielberg shot.
Like Kurosawa, the way he would block a scene, and then the way he would have it lit, they put their stamp on it, on visually for sure.
The thing that moves us from thinking about expert craftspeople at the peak of their game, like a really great director, whoever that is in your mind, we've already mentioned a few names, and turning that into truly an expose on what auteurism can be in movies, where it is that PhDs are earned and professorships are granted, we presume, is partly on the basis of connecting all of that really great, glorious, recognizable technique with a purpose. You look at a Spielberg filmography and you can pick out things that he's redoing over and over again. So I was watching this movie, especially once I bit down and bought it. 1 hour in. It was almost exactly 1 hour in. I was thinking, what is the point of this? What is the Peckinpah, not the technical stamp, because we can identify that, but what's the point? And I am one given to believe that people make those kinds of choices. They might not always conceive of it and write it in their notepad and send it around to the cast and crew and say, gang, this is what we're working on. But because I am aware of the many months, in fact years, it can take to make a movie, and this was an arduous process of shooting in Mexico.
I think every Peckinpah film was an arduous process for everybody
shooting in
involved.
Mexico, And I think the germ of this idea took some years to finally become the script of this movie. There's so much that rolls into making a movie. I'm not one to believe that things are just casually thrown out because you had to get something done on Monday. There is often something beneath it. And so the question in the air for you, if you've got an answer, is what's the point of this movie? It can be a negative message, but what is it trying to offer?
What's the point is what the point is. It seems to me that this is about as nihilistic as one can get. And if we, just for argument's sake, suggest that the film and the story is a metaphor for, Peckinpah versus the system or whatever.
I like that.
Everybody loses. There's even a line Benny has in the film where he's like, you can't lose, nobody can lose like all the time. Well, yes, they can. Clearly, this movie, this entire film is an ode to, yes, you can lose all the time. I just have to assume there's just great sorrow, great trauma, childhood trauma that is informing this stuff. And it just seems that the point of this movie is no matter how hard you try or how hard you work, you can't win.
Like many Peckinpah movies, it's just about savagery. Visited on people who aren't deserving of savage treatment and people who are deserving of savage treatment.
At least Benny went out on his own terms. I mean, obviously he was impacted by things that were out of his control, like the killing of Alita and all that stuff, which is kind of, I guess also, a metaphor for, like, Peckinpah, like, and this film in particular being, like, the only one, they make a big deal about this, the only one where he had, like, final cut. The world is a place where a person who, sticks to their guns is just going to wind up, destroyed by the machine, kind of.
There's a lot to that, and it's easy to talk about deeper themes of vengeance or revenge running through Peckinpah. Indeed, a whole bunch of filmmakers. I think it's mostly among fellas. I'm not sure that women much respond.
No,
to what he's all about.
He's like the Three Stooges.
There's this is hard to get out. But there's just like this little sidebar that happens while Benny and Alita are traveling through Mexico on their way to go find Alfredo Garcia's body, to decapitate him and bring his head back to El Jefe.
Right.
They're set upon by two bikers, played by Chris Christopherson and Chris Christopherson's real-life drummer, Donnie Fritz, who mean to rape Alita. Mm-hmm. She submits to this. Like, that's just what fellas do.
Right.
And only because Benny works up a little bit of nerve to shoot these men down before they are able to complete the act does it not happen. Now, when I was watching this at home, my girls and my wife are walking by behind. I got my headphones on. What you watching, Dad?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing. Is it good? Well, I'm not sure if I can tell you. So there are these elements that are just not going to be acceptable to a certain swath of the audience.
Well,
and I think a lot of women are going to have a hard time swallowing like these story points.
Yeah. Well, obviously, when we talked about Straw Dogs, the rape scene in Straw Dogs is fairly infamous.
Right. It is,
for the way it plays out, and possibly to Peckinpah's credit, like I can see how people might just be like, oh, like that's offensive. The idea that like she just is like cool to be raped or whatever. Mm-hmm. Unlike most of Hollywood, where a rape is included as just like a cheap way to gin up resentment against somebody, he's not using it in that way necessarily, and the way it's executed is inspiring a lot more sort of thought and discussion about like, well, what's really going on here. So Alita, she's a prostitute. She's sort of right, the hooker with the heart of gold kind of thing. And it's kind of a complex situation because like this comes right after that scene at the tree.
Well, they're picnicking, Benny and Alita.
Right.
And he's coming to realize that she loved Alfredo Garcia.
Right.
And they had to say goodbye with a bender of sex and drinking.
Right. Well, and then it's when they talk about, getting married and what is, sort of the most tender moment in the film where they're, against that tree. And so it's like right on the heels of that. And it's like, it's really a complicated situation because sex with strange men is kind of her trade. And she even has this line where she's like, I've been down this road before, like you haven't.
But she's rendered topless with a knife by Chris Christopherson. Like, but then she is leaning in to kiss him.
Right.
She's submitting to a sexual encounter, which doesn't any longer read like rape after the initial violence sets it up that way.
Right. Well,
Benny interrupts it, and then afterwards she has that explanation that I'm prepared for this.
Right.
But you're not. I can do this, but you can't.
Right.
The reason I am sort of shoving us this way, and it's important we address this scene because it's the thing that most people are going to see. They're going to leave the room. They're going to burn the computer that holds that electronic file. They're going to stop. Mm-hmm. And I suggest that the thoughtful viewer push through it all the way to the end, which you should see a complete movie before you truly judge it.
You can't otherwise.
And I want to suggest the following as a read that Garrett's bringing to the Peckinpah thing that is the vision of this director doing his job. The thought bubble first. There's a new kind of idea that I've been reading about to help me salve my soul during these rough times of 2025 in America.
Good luck with that.
And one of them has to do with Christian nationalism and
boy.
Paleo-Confederate belief systems attached to the evangelical church, which is a big bunch of mumbo-jumbo words that I've learned just in the last week or so, to say that there is a very archly male-dominated version of the Protestant faith that says women are just to be literally plowed, that the work of having a baby is all they're good for, and that's passive. They've got no role except to be seeded by men. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about that, raising 2 daughters, living with a wife who out-earns me by a lot, and she's very tolerant of all my weird habits. Like
Probably more than anybody's ever seen before.
Yeah. And she's very tolerant of my willingness and interest in talking about this kind of stuff, which involves all this disagreeable conduct. And I was stewing on this and stewing on it. If we accept the way that Elita is trying to deflate all of these really negative, violent male energies, especially in the near-rape scene that Benny finally puts a stop to by taking out his pistol and shooting these men down, she doesn't need anybody to die. She can defuse it, or so she thinks, and it sort of explains as much. The end of the movie, El Jefe's daughter, the one who was pregnant out of wedlock, has given birth to the grandson. They're having his celebration of birth. Huge party at the...
It's like a baptism, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a big deal, right?
A spiritual cleansing.
Benny shows up. He's given the $1 million. El Jefe's, thank you so much. Drink with me. No, I just want to leave. And Benny is clearly going to kill everybody. He's got the gun out. He's got El Jefe at gunpoint. And the daughter shows up, babe in hands. And this is the woman who has been humiliated in the opening of the movie. She's had her dress ripped off of her body. She's been doubled over and bent. Her arm was broken to confess the name of Alfredo Garcia. And she says to Benny, kill him. And so, putting these things together, I realize it's a little disjointed. But what I'm reading is kind of the deep structure of this movie, and maybe Peckinpah's vision, is men are brutish and driven by friendship and alcoholic rage towards violence. Women will absorb that, but they have an even deeper rage because they can be patient.
Yeah.
They'll take it out when possible.
Yeah, the revenge is a dish best served cold, the ancient Klingon proverb.
And in the end of the movie, El Jefe is gone. Most of his key lieutenants are gone. Most of his henchmen shoot down Benny, who is gone. The money is reabsorbed. But the daughter violated in the open of the movie has rid herself of her bastard of a father who did this terrible thing to her. And she, in the end, triggers Benny, who follows through on the impulse that the money doesn't drive him. Vengeance for Elita doesn't quite drive him. Friendship with Alfredo Garcia post-mortem kind of does drive him. He says winningly, I'll take care of the man, you take care of the boy.
Right.
Shoots El Jefe, takes the money, tries to drive off, is murdered. But she's left holding the boy, the new patriarch of the future or what have you. Putting all of this together, there is this notion that men are out there to control things, to dominate things, to destroy things, which is what we see most of the men in this movie do, including Benny. And women are left there to hold the bag, and when possible, to slow it down.
How do I say this? Like, in that situation, like, what kind of agency does a woman have, or at least, you know what I mean? Like, if you're in a situation, where...
it's designed to really test this boundary, not just of taste, because clearly the whole movie's in bad taste. Everything about this movie
absolutely
is in incredibly bad taste. It's incredibly repulsive, and still, it's thinking about some stuff that will be part of the darkness of our civilization, and is a part of the darkness of our civilization. At gunpoint, one weapon put on your boyfriend who wants to marry you and you want to marry him. The other gun and other assailant puts the gun on you and says, come with me. Pulls a knife and rips off your top. What can you do to preserve yourself, your fella, and bring this tension down?
Right.
Thinking about El Jefe's daughter. Your father is breaking your arm to get the name of your lover. You're naked in front of everybody you know, including your own mother and your grandparents. I mean, it's bonkers. Completely repulsive. What can you do? You can submit and give what's being asked for. It's the only way out. And then you can figure out something else.
Right.
The two key women in these small but significant supporting roles play offsetting these male forces. Again, this sort of goes back to that first question. The protagonist, El Jefe, and his daughter is the antagonist. And Benny, for most of the movie, is the foil that makes the thing go, but he is just expressing different aspects of that dyad, father and daughter. But I'm just really struck by those scenes, because they're the only spots where women have significant jobs to do that run against what we're expecting and complicate what the men do in response. El Jefe, when his daughter's like, kill him. What?
Yeah.
Arms in the... What?
Yeah.
My kid... What? Why is my daughter saying this?
Yeah, which is so, like, I can't believe that you can't believe this.
Right, I'm preserving the family name.
Right.
You just had a son. My grandson's been christened today. What? You want me murdered? In the same way, Elita is able to calm down the Christopherson rapey energy and turn him into the folk-singing soul that we know he is. Can you tell me about the cult status of this movie?
I think there's a portion of men in particular that will see this film and will just... because it's so ruthless. Right, and even I have to admit, like, rewatching it, because I do like it more and more every time I see it. The scene where Sappensley and Quill show up when Alfredo Garcia's family is about to kill Benny.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to that scene. Okay.
And Gig Young, he's got that, like, trench coat, and he just busts that machine gun out, and that look on his face. And he's just like in slow motion. I'm just like, that's so fucking cool.
Irony, is the distinction between what something means and what it seems to be, right? That moment you're discussing. Let me reset it up from a different point of view. We have Benny, who has captured the head of Alfredo Garcia at the cost of Elita's life, and he's already killed the two hitmen who presumably...
Yeah, Chalo and the other guy, yeah.
That happens off screen, but he does kill these... Elita's death happens off screen, although we find her body. They've been buried together.
With Alfredo Garcia, yeah.
The rest of his corpse. Benny revives himself, realizes that she is dead, and then goes on a rampage. He's got to recover Alfredo Garcia's head and avenge Elita. He manages to kill these first two men who killed Elita, and he recovers the head. But he's also being trailed by Alfredo Garcia's family, who know that the grave has been desecrated, and they want to put the head back with the body.
Right.
And they want to do harm to Benny. Benny's captured by them, more or less. They're about to take his life because they have recovered the head. And right then is when these two white hitmen show up, who have provided Benny the contract for $10,000 to go find Alfredo Garcia.
Hey, they're coming to kill Benny.
And it's clear from the way the conversation's going that it's pure violence is gonna happen. And so we have a peasant Mexican family in a very small village who are at the base motivated by trying to provide honor to their dead family member that has been violated by Benny and these two interlopers. Who knows who they are? But it's really awful what has happened.
Oh, yeah.
And so your allegiance is with them emotionally, if you're a thoughtful human on planet Earth. The trouble is, aesthetically, you want the guns to go off so badly.
Well, I think you're so invested, too, with Benny, like, you don't want to see... You're totally, like, on his side.
Right. How's he going to get out of this? Because he's not just outgunned. Because the family has weapons on him from every direction. But how are these two white dudes going to overtake them? Well, it's because of automatic firepower. While this jumps off, I can see this bro idea you were advancing. There is a superficial appeal to bloodshed is cool. Yes, kill everybody.
Well, and the Peckinpah's his expression of it is always so stylish. I mean, another directorial trademark beyond the bottle of liquor is the slow motion, like, deaths.
Yeah.
I had this realization a long time ago. Like, anytime you want to make something seem really cool, put it in slow motion, because only, like, the most thoughtful will see it as, like, just a cheap trick. And to everybody else, you're going to be like, wow, awesome.
And it functions along both of those ways. I mean, just to put this in a general context, Bonnie and Clyde has already happened to demonstrate this sort of operatically dreadful conclusion of slow motion mixed with incredible violence. He's already done The Wild Bunch. He's already done Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. He's already done Straw Dogs, which make this into a technique that is refined to a point of it's a gimmick.
Right.
You depend on it. Peckinpah's going to do this. And then he does it. And it builds up. We see violence jump off on a few occasions in the first hour of this movie before it really starts to jump off a lot. And it always involves these little flares of slow motion. I guess just to bring the point around, those techniques of slow motion and the violence that accompanies it to put it on screen is, to a certain kind of viewer, superficially, all the entertainment value you need.
Right.
Kill everybody.
Right.
And then to anybody who's bringing along their humanity behind that, they're having a moment through the slow motion to reflect on, oh my God, who's being killed? And Benny is the point of view character for that violence to jump off. When the two whiteys murder the peasant family, except for one member, the old man. But they kill a woman. They kill, I think, a young boy. They just kill everybody.
Yeah.
And Benny notices and registers the terrible sacrifice that this was, the unnecessary sacrifice this was, the cruelty that the violence was. That shows up, and that's the part that's boring to the bro culture. Who cares about the consequences?
Right.
What does it even matter?
Right.
We got all the bloodshed. Isn't that cool?
Right, exactly.
And the cool factor fades the longer we linger on the consequence of the violence.
Well, that's what's so funny, because like I was having both of these things at the same time.
Yeah, I can see
watching
why.
it, I was like, man, that's so cool. And then I'm like, dude, that's so grim.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine? Because you're getting to sit with their death like a little longer.
Right. But in the 1970s, when Peckinpah is making this movie and others that have a similar thematic undertone and a similar craft and a similar backdrop and similar characters played by the same actors. So these things that occur, they're winking at one another, and they're meant to be winking at us. But if you can't see the wink, you missed it. It plays like the bleakest, darkest, most toxic and awful and dreadful stuff with no breath to say there's also something else at work. During the season this movie is released in the United States, and this was August 74, so a summer release, we have a bunch of auteur filmmakers at work at the same time.
Yeah, we sure
including Alan J. Pakula's The Parallax View in Chinatown, The Terminal Man, and even Truck Turner by Jonathan Kaplan.
Truck Turner, co-starring Nichelle Nichols.
As a pimp,
Senator Uhura, right.
By the time we get to July 74, Death Wish is out there, Gone in 60 Seconds, the original. I want to come back to the Monty Hillman.
Yes.
In August, we have California Split, Robert Altman. We have The Longest Yard, the original, by Robert Aldrich. Then in October, we round out the season of this auteur snapshot, because this is a recording about directors, with The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Taking of Pelham 123, It's Alive, and De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise.
Yeah.
Now, the one title that I want to come back to now is Monty Hellman's Cockfighter, often brought to the world as Born to Kill, but it was called Cockfighter.
Yep.
Also starring Warren Oates.
Yep.
Which makes evident the fact that Warren Oates was one, a working actor. The guy took jobs all the time. But he also had this knack for picking roles that were made by thoughtful filmmakers who were willing to go into sort of dicey areas and develop characters around those dicey experiences, which were in turn very dicey.
Well, it's funny because Monty Hellman, too, he seems to be kind of like Peckinpah as well, where a lot of his work is just kind of these examinations of sort of masculinity. And they also both seem to love Warren Oates, because Monty Hellman also made Two-Lane Blacktop.
Yeah.
Cockfighter's actually, it's actually a pretty interesting film.
Well, you used a word just then. The word was interesting. That was your statement. That is a signal to me when I'm experiencing somebody's genuflection at the foot of something they really enjoy, that it's not necessarily good.
Right.
But it's something distinct. And I suppose to wrap up this notion of what a director's contribution to the world of movies is, the sort of sedate word that I like to give people is it's weird. That's value neutral, at least from where Garrett sits. It just means it's notches off of the typical expectation.
Right.
Weird. That can be good, it can be bad, but it's unusual. But when we say something is interesting, we're suggesting that there is expectation, normalcy, typical stuff, right? The mainstream.
Right.
But if it's interesting, it's something else.
Right. It deviates from that road a little to a lot.
So this movie, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, is at a minimum an interesting movie by an interesting filmmaker about interesting characters doing interesting things. Now, did I even once say good or bad? I did not. And that's advisably the fact of how we should unpack a movie that is as thorny and strange as this one is, because it's a hard watch.
The scene with Alfredo Garcia's family and then Sappenstein and Quill showing up, that might be the best scene in the film, and some of like the most poignant stuff that Benny says is in that scene. There's when he's trying to explain to Alfredo Garcia's family who don't speak English, and he's just like, I'm going to finish this with him, Al. Like I said, it is no longer about the money or the reward or him just doing a job for somebody.
It's the demand of friendship through this odd connection, but they've got to see the journey through.
Right, and giving some meaning to his life.
last of all for me is the central importance of male bonding. The first and most prominent is Benny and Al. Mm-hmm. Al, of course, never talks, and we don't fortunately actually see the decaying head of this deceased man.
Right.
Who, by the way, dies of drunken driving. Mm-hmm. He crashes his car. That's why the man is killed. So alcohol even is baked into Al's story. But we listen to Benny talk and monologue at Al while he's carrying this head around Mexico. So the bond that they establish, and partly that bond is Benny out loud for our benefit, acknowledging we both loved Elita.
Right.
But I love her now.
Right.
And now she's gone, and I'm so sad.
Right.
But you know what that's like,
right.
Al, you deadhead.
Right. Exactly. He's the only one who can kind of understand. Right.
It's heartbreaking, that kind of bond. The other one, which is not focused on nearly as much, but it's Sapinsley and Quill.
Yep.
They are a bonded pair of killers. Once the peasant family of Garcia is murdered, Sapinsley needs to hunt Benny, but Benny gets him first. Shoots him in the chest. He hasn't quite died, Sapinsley, but he sees Quill, who's fallen to death holding a machine gun.
Yeah.
Hey, Johnny.
They're lovers.
Yeah.
One final element I want to just draw on. El Jefe says, $1 million. Bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia. He sends out his minions. And among the chain, we eventually get Sapinsley and Quill, who manage to offer Benny $10,000. 1% of the $1 million. We get the other 99. So in other words, $1 million bounty to do the project. And then they're going to nickel and dime the guy who's going to execute the project to 1/100th of its value.
Right.
That's movies.
Yeah, right.
And I just can't help but read it in light of this being about what a director's job is on set, as itself a metaphor of the direction job on a set. This is Blockbusters and Birdwalks. I'm the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray.
I'm Ed Rosa, bon vivant and professional simpleton.
Boop boobity doo.